Arijit, hi. We wanted to chat with you about the GA panel discussion this morning, particularly one comment that you made I'd like to explore a little further. It seemed that you were one of the only dissenting members of the panel who felt that scale possibly wasn't a major inhibitor for Australian organisations, shared service organisations. You talked in particular about one client that you've worked with who has managed a transformation process with only 500 people inside the business. I wonder if you can just take us in a little bit more detail through why you believe so strongly that scale shouldn't be an inhibitor for Australian organisations.
Thanks, Emma. So I guess one of the reasons is dissent is good, but jokes apart, our view on this is as follows. We believe that most companies out there in the marketplace have taken a very traditional view and said scale, simplicity, X amount of economic benefit is a prerequisite for getting benefits from a shared services center or outsourcing. And our perspective is it needs to be worked in a particular way, both by the company which is doing the shared services center or outsourcing, as well as the provider who actually steps up to do that. But it can be actually very successful if architected the right way. And by right way, I mean 2 or 3 things. So from a client perspective, there needs to be a lot of discipline in the way you go about the process. It's obviously much more difficult to do something like this for 17 people and keep the momentum and the focus on it than it is for 500 people. There needs to be a fair degree of executive commitment, saying that we need to make this happen, maybe for bigger, better things in the future. Also, companies which are of that size typically tend to have lesser maturity in doing this. So as you go through the process, there are some risks that the process may get derailed because there's not enough experience, there's not enough willingness to go the whole distance. On the flip side, I think providers need to adapt the way they approach this kind of business. And one, they need to apply some mass customization principles. You don't need to do the same thing that you do in a large program in terms of engagement, in terms of putting in a lot of overhead. So you need to apply some simple principles to do that in a much more standardized way. But if you can set it up so that you, as a shared service center operator or an outsourcer, run many of these programs, you can create value through aggregation. So whether you do one 500 FTE program or 10, 40 FTE programs for different clients, but you manage them in such a way that your overhead and your delivery architecture is not hugely dissimilar, you can actually create value for both sides.
Thank you. And another point that I think we alluded to earlier that I'd like to explore more is around the higher end shared service proposition. You made a point that maybe there may be a value play around specialist skills that you can't build in-house. And I'd like to ask you a little bit about what you think maybe the best way to get there in terms of higher value shared services, and what are some of the potential risks that our members need to think about?
So I believe it's a myth that has been propagated for a long time, that you essentially place simple rule-based processes in a shared services center. And the reason people look at it that way is essentially you look at it as a cost play, and you look at it as a model which should be minimum risk. If you look at it as a resource augmentation play, as a supply side arbitrage play, as a value play, then there's a huge opportunity to actually outsource or place in a shared service fairly specialized functions which would traditionally not be put in that kind of a structure. Now, in terms of getting there, I've seen that done with 3 or 4 clients who've actually built a shared services center, what they call a knowledge center of excellence from scratch. And 3 or 4 things. One, have the vision of end state. So today you have 17 departments. 2 of them use 3 analysts each. 1 of them uses a data cruncher. 2 of them use market researchers. And they all do different things in different ways. So have the roadmap and the end state vision so you can see all of it coming together in a shared services center over a period of time. 2, set it up so that there is a clear executive commitment to get to that end state in a matter of 12 months, 14 months, whatever it takes. 3 is use internal support as well as external support in terms of having key evangelizers, supporters of that kind of a business model who talk about success and help the others get onto that bandwagon. Because it's not as simple as saying 100 people doing an accounting function, just move them. It is about saying there are different pieces which we can put together and it makes sense, right?
Arijit, thank you very much.
Thanks, Emma.